Well, good day to you. It is December the 23rd, and I'm having a great day. Are you having a great day? I sure hope you are. Now, if this is your first time ever listening to Search for Signs, I do want to welcome you. I want to thank you to Search for Signs. What we talk about here is the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. We take a deeper look at who and what Maitreya is, and we also discuss why are the Masters returning now to the everyday world during this historic yet tumultuous time. And, of course, what does it mean for you? We tie it into the current events of the time, the social unrest, the political divisions, the economic uncertainty, of course, things like the coronavirus. Try to tie it into a hopeful message. You know, there's not a lot of hope out there when you watch the news, right? And tie it into the many signs that have been going on all around the world in all walks of life for decades. And for the religious and the non-religious. And because it's happening in with every religious group, they're all having their own miracles, and people who perhaps don't have any real religious faith to speak of are having their own miracles. Does that mean that they're all linked? Does it mean, just possibly, that the teacher, the one who made a promise to each one of those religions to come back at some point, is already here and has been living in the United States, has been living in London since July 19th, 1977. And has also been speaking on TV, undeclared as the one awaited by all the religions, just being presented as a normal, ordinary person who's deeply concerned about humanity's problems and trying to give solutions to help us solve our own problems. Is that what's going on or not? Now, what are his solutions? What is his priorities, really? That's the most important thing that we could look at. Now, Maitreya says, peace is a necessity. Our very future depends upon whether we can do this or not. He puts it like this: without sharing, there could be no justice. Without justice, there could be no peace. Without peace, there could be no future. So, like I said, our very survival depends on it. Now, because most people have an idea of what justice is, and most people have an idea of what peace is, that's the reason why people who want a future, right, for themselves and their children are marching for justice and marching for peace. But how many people are marching for sharing, right? It's the first step. In fact, you can't even have justice or peace without sharing. And if you're living in the United States and you talk about sharing, of course, people immediately put up their fingers in the cross motion like you're Dracula, right? And say, whoa, that's communism, that's socialism, that's bad, right? Well, let's be very clear. It's actually beyond socialism, beyond capitalism, because those are actually just man-made terms. It's even beyond capitalism, for that matter. It's the way life should be lived, because the way all throughout cosmos, it knows nothing but sharing, really. We're the only ones that aren't doing it right, But if you look historically, before I wax too intellectual on it, okay? If you look historically, there was a time when we actually instituted the principle of sharing. Here in the United States, believe it or not, as a capitalist of a country as we are, we actually tried it, and it worked. It did a great job. Right after World War II, the powers that be looked at Europe and said, if we don't do something to help Europe out that's in shambles, they could enter a whole other dark age. Wars could flare back up again, and it would involve the nations of the world to come back and fight again as another world war. So they knew they had to stabilize and rebuild Europe on some level. Now, what we would do today is we would give them aid and then expect them to pay it back. Well, what George C. Marshall did was he took an inventory of the excesses that were sitting in the United States, wasting away, going bad, just not doing anything, and turned around and gave it freely to Europe to help them rebuild their infrastructures, to get them back on their feet. Once they did do that, they started to create excesses and gave it back to the United States as payment for what they initially took. What did it do initially? It rebuilt Europe. It stabilized the social and economic unrest that was going on. The people were able to be fed, they were housed, they started to live their lives again the way they did. And it also created an economic boom back here in the United States. That was the initial effect, which is pretty cool, right? The long-term effect was nothing less than miraculous, because even though it was done for just a short amount of time, a long time ago, 7 decades later, we still trust those nations, and they trust us better than any other nations on the planet. So that's the reason why Maitreya says, without sharing, there could be no justice. Without justice, there could be no peace. Now, the other part, without peace, there could be no future. even just looking at the environment. One or two nations or 10 nations even, or 20 nations cannot solve the ecological problem. It has to be everybody working together. There has to be a measure of goodwill amongst the nations, a measure of trust among the nations in order to tackle that problem. If what happened after World War II created a peaceful, trusting relationship between nations, let's try it globally and see if it doesn't do the same thing globally. So, just something to think about. Now, if you have any questions about what we talk about here, I always invite questions. I love questions. I look forward to seeing what the questions are going to be coming my way in the next video, and then I talk about it in the next video, just like I'm going to do in this one. If you have a comment, of course, comments go into three categories. Those that are trolling, and I usually just take those out and dump them out. Other ones I might not really want to talk about, or really can talk about, or should talk about, I guess, but I leave them up there for you to read. And then the other ones I might talk about a little bit. So in this particular, and then, like I said, just if you have a question, just post it as a comment, or you can email me at searchforsigns@mail.com. Now, in this particular video, so many comments came my way from what we talked about over the last couple of videos that really, and they're so long, I'm not trying to leave anybody out, but if you want to ask, if you're wanting me to talk about what you wrote, perhaps you could focus it in on a couple, three things, or one thing maybe, ask a question that does help. If not, I'm just going to leave the comments up for people to read. Okay, so I'm not trying to leave you out. It's just that I couldn't possibly go through and read all the comments out and discuss every line of the comments and keep this video under 3 hours. But the one comment that I did want to talk about comes from Christians Exposing the New World Order. Now, before I get into the comment and the question that you wrote, I did want to talk about your name because it pertains to one of the videos that you sent me. Now, the other thing too is if you send a comment with a video link, even if it's a YouTube video link, it goes right into my spam folder. I get bombarded with people putting links up all the time, and I don't have all the time in the world to go through and look at all of them. And I've even had some Asian dating site links in there. So, that's the reason why I set it up to where if you put a link as a comment, it's going to go right into my spam folder for me to review. Now, I did go through and I looked at all the videos that you had wanted me to watch. I didn't spend 2 hours watching it, but I did listen to it, get a gist of what they were talking about, and then came back and watched it again, so perhaps, and so forth. But I do want to focus in on a couple of the videos, not all of them, okay? So if there's something you want me to talk about, Christians Exposing the New World Order, that I'm not talking about, perhaps you could point it more into just one video this time, and then we could talk about that and the next one. How about that? Will that work for you? Now, the one video that you wanted me to watch had William Cooper, and I was very familiar with William Cooper before I watched that video. William Cooper was a very far-right conspiracy theorist who devoted his whole life to the conspiracy theory that the Illuminati or the United Nations are going to take over the world. Aliens were involved in it, and of course Maitreya, because he had just heard Maitreya through a friend of his girlfriend's, that he must be the poster child that the Illuminati is going to be putting up about the New World Order. Okay? And I first read William Cooper almost 30 years ago. Read it, Behold a Pale Horse, three times. Picked it up not too long ago, read it again. Watched his videos and so forth. Now, the interesting thing, a couple things. One, he talked about aliens coming and taking us over and tying it into Maitreya and the New World Order and so forth. And I don't know if you watched this video, but there's an interview that this young lady did not long before he died. And he was killed in a raid, I think, with the United States government raided his house, and he was killed. He admitted that there was no truth to what he said about aliens. In fact, actually, I was quite surprised that he even admitted it. He kind of spun it a little bit and said that he thought it was counterintelligence that he was reading while in naval intelligence and so forth, but, he admitted there was no truth to it. So maybe there's no truth to what he's talking about with Maitreya, is my opinion on that. Now, I do believe he believed 100% of what he was talking about. I don't think he was trying to do it to be deceptive, but like I said, I was quite surprised that he even admitted. I thought he would be more like somebody that would take, once he found out that there was no truth to it, take it to his grave, but it shows something about his character. that he was willing to admit he was wrong. So now the whole New World Order has been presented. Nothing happened with it. Then they repackage it in a different way, and then they repackage it in a different way, but it's all fear. Maitreya will tell you, you don't know how far out your thoughts go and your emotions and your fears go before they come, and how much damage they do to the people around you and to your environment before they come back on you. It comes back on you in equal and opposite reaction. But joy is the same way. If you put out joyful, loving, creative thoughts, it goes far out, much farther out than you can imagine. It does a lot of creative and a lot of benefit for those around us and those that we probably don't even know, before it comes back to us in equal and opposite reaction as love and as creative thoughts and as joy. So he put out a lot of fear. And the thing that my opinion of William Cooper, real quick, was he just seemed like he lived a very sad life. For as intelligent of a man as he is, and for as much as I think he had to say, I don't know. I was always pulled away from, I couldn't imagine living my life under that kind of stress all the time, moment to moment, and how much damage it caused those around him. So anyway, just something to think about. Now, where was I? So the New World Order was originally packaged, that I heard, was about the United Nations taking over the United States and then taking over the world. Then it was the Illuminati. I guess now it's the Deep State. Is that the new name for it? I don't know if you've ever been in Georgia. I've lived in Georgia a long time. I know a lot of people here in Georgia, and they look like normal people, but I'm going to tell you right now, they're heavily armed, and they have a lot of bullets and ammo, and they have a lot of guns. So more than likely, there isn't any kind of New World Order coming anytime soon, because there's over 300 million guns in this country, and there's just no way. That's just the way I look at it. So I'm not criticizing your name. Now, I will say this, and this I think shows the difference between Maitreya's New World Order and William Cooper's view of Maitreya being the head of a New World Order that's going to take over the world in the way that he thought and imagined and feared that he would. And the only reason why I'm saying this one little paragraph is because Maitreya uses the word New World in capital letters. So this is Maitreya, and he said this through Benjamin Creme, a long time ago, back when Hector was a pup, as my grandfather would say. When I make myself known, I shall express the hope of all mankind for a new life, a new start, a readiness to change direction, to see the construction of a new world in which men can live in peace, can live free from fear of themselves or their brothers, free to create from the joy in their hearts, free to be themselves in simple honesty. So that's the closest you'll get to Maitreya talking about a new world order. So anyway, now to get to your question, your comment, before it gets too late. You said, the Bible says that the counterfeit kingdom and the counterfeit Christ come first, and then at the end of the 7-year tribulation period, Jesus comes back, and then he begins in the real millennium reign. The world doesn't end when Jesus comes back. He just destroys the Antichrist, the false prophet, and all those who receive the mark of the beast. And then he brings in the real kingdom of righteousness to this world. I believe that the false kingdom and the false Messiah is soon coming, and then at the end of the 7-year tribulation, Jesus comes back, and he will bring the real true kingdom of God on earth. I agree with you about the ages. At the end of the 7-year tribulation, Jesus comes back, and then the real new age begins. But first, the false new age of the false Messiah must come first according to Bible prophecy. And this is your question. Could Maitreya be the false Messiah that brings in the counterfeit kingdom of God that the Bible warns us about? And then you went on to say, and thanks for answering my previous question, and thanks for your prayers. As again, thank you for the questions, because they actually help to talk about something, help us to get to know a little bit more about this information. And of course, thank you, and bless you for the prayers as well. Now, you're not probably going to like the way I answer this question, because I'm not going to answer it. I'm not avoiding the question. You seem like a smart person, and if you've listened to any videos, and you said that you've listened to a few of my videos, you would already know the answer of my answer to that question, okay? So I'm not avoiding the question, but you already know what I'm going to say. Now, the reason why I'm not going to answer it is let me be very clear about this, is, how do I say this? I am not the slightest bit concerned or care about changing your particular belief. People are very concerned about my beliefs and they want me to change my beliefs, but I'm never trying to change your beliefs. I respect your belief. I know why you think the way you think, okay? I don't agree with it, but that's okay, right? And in all honesty, if, like I said before, if you believe Maitreya is the Antichrist, that is okay. There will be a time when you see Maitreya on TV. You'll hear what he says for yourself. You'll experience his love, experience the wisdom and the sanity of his solutions. And then you'll be able to decide for yourself whether he's the false Messiah or not, for yourself. But in the meantime, you might have seen him on TV, but you haven't recognized him. You haven't seen him in your life. You haven't heard his words, and you haven't experienced his love. So how could you possibly, how could I explain yes or no to you? Does that make sense? My job is simply to just tell you and others that Maitreya is here, and for you to believe it, to think about it or not. That's it. Not to change your belief, and hopefully, it's not a numbers game. I'm wanting one person, just one person, to take this information and do something with it to help end hunger, to help end suffering, to help save our planet. And I would be totally happy with that. So that's my only focus, is that. Okay? Now, to answer your concerns in a different way, okay, than just coming out directly and answering it, okay, we're going to talk about the ages, and we're going to talk about the biblical prophecy, because you had mentioned something in the last comment that you made in the last video, or 2 videos ago, I guess, about biblical prophecy being fulfilled upon, in front of our eyes right now, okay, or something like that, right? Now, the Bible prophecy, especially, let's talk about Revelation. Let's just focus on that for right this second, okay? If you look at, and I've never heard anybody explain it like this, so I'm not plagiarizing anybody. If you look at Revelation with the eyes of fear, it's going to scare the living shit out of you, right? You're going to think that, and I hate to break it to you, but you're not the only person who thinks that the end times are now, during this time. There were actually people who lived thousands of years ago that thought the end times and revelations pertained to them, because they were, quote unquote, seeing the signs too. Okay? Now, if you look at Revelation with the eyes of love and joy and hope, it is perhaps the most hopeful book in the Bible, because it speaks of the hope of humanity. But John was speaking very symbolically about what he saw. Benjamin Creme was speaking to a different audience, but speaking about the same hope of humanity, for humanity, that John was, but just in a very much more, maybe perhaps literal way than John was saying it. Okay? Now, in terms of the ages, and this pertains, I think, to why John used symbols to explain what he saw versus just coming right out and talking about it, okay, is he was speaking to a whole different group of people that were uneducated, had no idea about life, had no idea about themselves, had no idea what was going on within their own body, let alone what was going on the other side of the mountain. And I think if we could go back in time and get into the head of just the average person and the way that they saw life, you would be floored at how little they knew about anything. And when they were speaking, when Jesus was speaking to them, when John was speaking to them, when the disciples and the Apostle Paul was speaking to them, they knew who they were speaking to, and they were speaking in a way that they could understand them. So Jesus said, "What you sow shall you reap." Very simple. He was speaking to farmers who knew nothing but farming, to explain a universal law that governs all our lives, moment to moment, that colors our whole life, that we need to eventually learn how to live harmlessly, or our lives will be miserable until we do. And so But yet he said it so simply, what you sow, so shall you reap. If he had said it any other way, they would never even understood what he was talking about. Maitreya is talking about the same principle, the same truth, the same law, but yet he's explaining it differently, and will eventually, over the coming age, speak of it much more scientifically than Jesus did, because we have a better understanding of ourselves than he did. You know, people have asked me even before, where's Maitreya written in the Bible? Well, just because he wasn't written in the Bible doesn't mean it's not true. I mean, there's organs that they never spoke of in the Bible. Doesn't mean we don't have them. They never mentioned the liver or the pancreas or the lungs or even the brain. But it doesn't mean we don't have those organs that were discovered scientifically after they had been speaking. But had they been mentioning those organs, they would have no concept of what they were talking about. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's the same thing, Now, the ages that you talked about, it's an astronomical fact that our sun goes around in an orbit around cosmos and gets into alignment with one or other of these constellations. It's an astrological truth, whether you believe it or not, that all is energy. And each one of those constellations emits an energy that has a different quality. That energy is not dead and lifeless. It has different qualities. It has there's an intelligence to those energies and so forth, but those energies color, according to the Ageless Wisdom teachings, they color the ways that we think, the ways that we interrelate, and the civilizations in which what we build during that time. So, the ideals that we live by today, be the best, be creative, live your own life, live the American dream, live your dreams, whatever the ideal is that we live by, right? And you've heard those terms before, so I'm not just making this up. If we were to go back 2,000 years ago and talk to those people, they would have no idea what you're talking about. It would go right past them. Now, it took living under, and lifetimes of living under the light of the energies of Pisces to build this powerful, potent individual that we all live today. Now, the next step for humanity is we are moving more into the energies under the influence of Aquarius. So our structures, for instance, even our economic, our political, our social structures, our healthcare structures, our educational structures are all built on the energies of the past. That's where they're all based on competition and greed, because it's all based on the individual, to benefit the few at the expense of the many, right? Now, where the masters come in and why they're coming in now is because they are here to help us, along with Maitreya, build the structures of the new, because those structures of the past are dying, they're crumbling, they're dismantling before our very eyes. Our world leaders have no clue why they're not working, and they're quite frustrated about it, and then they throw more money at it, and it goes up for a time, the market goes up, and then it goes right back down, bam. It's because they don't fulfill the needs of the people, which is the energies are more and more coming in from the energies of Aquarius. That's why we have to start looking at how do we build these new structures that support those energies, that will bring about peace, justice, cooperation. That's where the masters are coming in now for that reason. Okay, so the ideas of the Aquarian age, synthesis, brotherhood, cooperation, peace, even, sharing, justice. These are just words. Most of us don't even understand what they mean, and we certainly don't live by their principles, right, and the truths of those principles, right? It's going to take us another 2,000 years to really, if we could go 2,000 years into the future, we will see life and people and in humanity living very as one, as unified and synthesized as a one human family, where sharing is going on all the time. That's like, yeah, of course, why would you do that? They'll probably be horrified about the fact that we even put up with the fact that there were people dying of hunger. How can you live your life like that? And be absolutely dumbfounded that we had structures that supported that. But that's the reason why, because we're on the tail end of those Piscean energies and into the new ones. Now, you talk about the new age, right, all the time, right? When you look at the Bible, right, in the Old Testament, how many times in the Old Testament was the symbol of the fish written in the Old Testament? Anybody? None, right? How many times was it written in the New Testament? A lot. Well, the people were using the symbol of the fish to relate it to the constellation of Pisces before Jesus was born. That's why it was written in the Bible, to symbolize to those people that Jesus was the teacher for the age of Pisces. That's the reason why they had all those symbols of the fish in there. Now, you might not agree with that, but that's esoterically, that's, you know, from the Ageless Wisdom teachings perspective, that's why they were there. So the new time, the symbol for the water carrier is the age-old symbol for the constellation Aquarius. Well, in the Bible, Jesus said to his disciples, follow the man carrying the bucket of water up the steps and thus prepare the feast. Okay? Now, a few videos back, somebody had said and commented that Jesus was simply giving them directions. Okay. Whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I'm not trying to change your view on it. I'm just expressing a different view on it. Now, perhaps he was giving directions. Maybe they took out in the Bible where Jesus told them to go down the street, hang a left, go down a half a block, make a right, and then follow the guy with carrying a bucket of water up the steps to thus prepare the feast. I don't know. Maybe he did, right? Maybe it was simple directions, right? I think it was a symbol symbolizing this coming time where Maitreya will be the world teacher for the age of Aquarius. Something to think about. So the concepts of the New Age that people are so against in the religious fields are actually a lot of times written in their own scriptures. Now, I don't buy everything that people say about the New Age and the New Age movement, like some of these other videos that you wanted me to watch. I don't group Alice Bailey, Helena Blavatsky, or Benjamin Creme in that regard because they don't have an emotional, aspirational kind of teaching about these New Age principles. They take a much more scientific approach to it, which I find there's more truth to it for me. But when it comes to reading the Bible or reading Deepak Chopra or what was the other one they talked about in the Oprah Book Club, the Course in Miracles, right? I've read the Bible more than I've read those, and I relate more to the Bible than I relate to those two teachings, right? But, you know, I don't fault Oprah Winfrey for presenting that to her book readers. You know, I mean, it's just a different view, you know. But when somebody's against another view, that's one of the qualities of Pisces. Then they get very reactionary to it. And if you're very dogmatic about your views, well, then you get very fearful about somebody else's view on life, on God, perhaps, or whatever. And it's just a different view. You know what I'm saying? It's just, they're all speaking about the same thing. Now, the one thing that the minister that you had, the video that you talked about, and for the life of me, I went to go write it down, but I didn't, and I'm so sorry, and now I'm going to have to talk about it, so I'm going to probably muck it up a little bit. But he had quoted Isaiah, okay, and he had talked about evolution and how the New Agers talk about evolution, but yet in Isaiah, he says that God is unchanging, unmoving, or something like this, right? And therefore, it kind of led me to believe that he was thinking that we should not think of life in terms of evolution, that it should always be the same, right? Maybe perhaps not even advance our modus operandi and way of doing things, or, you know, even changing our way we think, because it should be static, or, you know, or whatever, right? I think it's a gross misinterpretation of what Isaiah was talking about. Now, Isaiah, from my point of view, he was talking about God. Yes, there is a part of God that is unchanging, but that's the part of God that's beyond consciousness, as Maitreya refers to it as the self. That's the divinity that we all share. So the lie that the churches, from my perspective, the lie that the churches have been putting out for centuries is that we are separate from God, and they're the intermediary between us and them and God. Therefore, we must go to them, give them our money, give them our energy, give them our time, give them our devotion in order to get to God. When in fact, God is all around us. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's just as close to you as your own hand. Now, that same absolute could be looked at it like this in a theory, right? The space that allows your car to exist, okay, is unmoving. So when you drive that car out of your driveway, has anything happened to the space that allowed your car to be parked in your driveway or your garage? No, right? That's what Isaiah was talking about in terms of God being unchanging, unmoving. It's the space that allows all consciousness to exist. The lie that the churches are saying about us being separate from God, there can never be any truth to that, even based on just what Isaiah said, because that space that allows that car to exist, where does that space end? Can you tell me? Does it end at the end of the driveway? And then there's another space. Or does it end at the end of your street, or the end of your town, or the end of your state, or the end of your country, or the end of the planet? Or does it keep going on and on and on for infinity, right? That's the unmoving, unchanging God that Isaiah was talking about. The same thing that Maitreya says is the absolute or the self, and that's the divinity that we all share. The other untruth about Maitreya is that they think that because he's the Antichrist, he's going to be expecting everybody to worship him. He will exalt himself or try to exalt himself even above God. Maitreya knows the truth, that we are all divine, that we all share that same divinity that Isaiah was talking about. It's just the level of manifestation of that divinity is the only difference. So when you see Maitreya, when you finally recognize Maitreya on TV, or he finally declares himself as Maitreya, or as the one awaited by all the world's religion, and then you know for sure, right? You see him interact with world leaders. You see him interact with celebrities. You see him interact with, an educated person. Or you see him interact with the lowest, poorest, most uneducated members of humanity. You will see a person who doesn't exalt himself above any one of those people, that sees himself as one, speaks to them heart to heart that way. So he will not only exalt himself above God, he will not exalt himself above the lowest, most uneducated, poorest members of our humanity. But the reason why I'm not answering your question is because you need to see him for yourself before you make up your mind. Just wait and see. You don't have to put a lot of time and energy into looking for the Antichrist, because the Antichrist has already come and gone, right? And if you want to waste your time, right? But wait for Maitreya to come out, or to be recognized, and you to recognize him, have a heartfelt response to it, and then decide, because you might have a different opinion of him once you get to know him. Maybe not, right? The other thing is that I was going to talk about something else. Maybe we'll talk about it in a different video, because it is getting a little long. But it's just wait. And like I said, just wait and see, right? And if, how do I say this? I would say if I was in your shoes, this is what I was going to say. If I was in your shoes, a more common sense approach to Maitreya is not that he's the Antichrist, because why would an Antichrist figure be on TV speaking to tens of millions of people at a clip and never claim to be anything but just an ordinary person? Wouldn't it stand to reason, since other people are saying that it says in the Bible that the Antichrist, the false prophet, is going to exalt himself above Jesus, and wouldn't he be already doing that? You know what I'm saying? Maybe he's just trying to get his solutions out there to people. For us, because that's the most important thing. I say it in the beginning of these videos. It's the most important thing that you can take is his priorities for peace, right? Now, I think a more common sense view of who and what Maitreya is not that he's the Antichrist, is that he's a figment of my imagination and Benjamin Creme and other people's imagination. That Benjamin Creme made him up. He's the second cousin to Santa Claus or Harvey the Rabbit or whatever it is, and Benjamin Creme devoted his whole life to a mirage, and people like me are dumb enough to believe him. So that is a more likely scenario than Maitreya being the Antichrist, actually. So when people come up and say, there's no truth to any of this, Maitreya's made up in his mind. I guess we'll have to wait and see. You know what I'm saying? Because I can't argue that either way, right? I actually kind of understand why they even think that, right? But I don't understand why people think he's the Antichrist, because you haven't even seen him. You haven't even recognized him. You haven't heard anything that he said. You haven't, so why would you go around thinking and making taking great strides and wasting so much time and energy trying to convince me or other people that he's the Antichrist when you haven't even heard him. You know what I'm saying? It'd be better to wait. So anyway, hopefully that helps. But anyway, if again your other comments, I'll probably have to wait and talk in some of the other videos. But anyway, hopefully this helps, and I look forward to talking to you guys again in the next video. And as always, take action. Help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos. Have a great day.